almost every major company now has a huge dev base in India, whether it is Zynga, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Disney, EA, pretty much all of them. And I think there are a lot of opportunities and challenges in setting up these studios and operating them. So we have a very, very fantastic panel over here talking about it. The moderator of the panel is Rajesh Rao, who runs Dhruva. Dhruva is pretty much the first and the oldest games company, and Rajesh is pretty much the champion and the leader of the industry from all of us. So Rajesh, it's over to you to introduce everybody and take the panel forward.
Thank you, Vishal, and hello, everybody. Around 15 years back, I met an evangelist from Intel, and at that time I was running a multimedia company, and he convinced me that I should be giving up on multimedia and starting to get into games. So 15 years later, here I am, and we have a very, so that was the early years. We were a three-man company at that time in 1997. And today, Dhruva is 150, 160 people in size, and one of the largest developers in India. And on the dais today, we have a very eminent panel. I mean, this panel constitutes some of the leaders of development in India. We have Rishi Oberoi, who heads India Game Studios. Is a veteran, many years, 10+ years and 120 games. I quickly read that bio and said that's a lot of games on many platforms. We have Jugul, who runs the CHHAYA studios in Cochin, in Kerala, which is south of India. One of the more recent entrants, but over the last 5-6 years, they've grown in a very fantastic manner, and I think we'd love to hear your story. Ninad, again, one of the pioneers of the industry in India, started very early along with Vishal. He was involved with India Games for many years before he went on to join Jump Games, and more recently he started a company called Plecasa, which is a mobile social developer publisher of games. And Anila comes from a very interesting company called 99 Games, based in a beautiful temple town of Udupi in South India. And it's a very interesting story of starting I mean, if anybody told you, even told any of us in India that there was a gaming company in Udupi, we would like say, really? And they have a huge development center, and they're a very successful company. So. With that introductions, what I'd like to do is to ask each of the panelists to give a quick 2-minute kind of overview of their journey of setting up and creating a dev studio, just as an overview, and then we'll get on to talking about challenges and some of the the ways they found solutions to some of the shortcomings. Growing teams, growing capabilities. I think those would be follow-on questions. So starting with you, Rishi.
Yeah. So I started off with India Games about 10 years ago, and at that time we had just a handful of developers. Almost no one had any games experience whatsoever. And I think that's something that you'll find common across all the studios here on the panel. We were about maybe 8 programmers or so, everyone fresh out of college, everyone just getting their hands wet in the first jobs. And what we realized is, Vishal being the entrepreneur that he is, he loves to throw people in the deep end of the pool. And that's what we were all told to do. All of us were given a game to do and said, okay, go and do it. So we said, okay, that's interesting, let's figure out how to do this. And that's exactly how it's been all throughout. But when we quickly found success, because we were amongst the first game companies to do mobile games, and because there weren't many others anywhere else in the globe, we realized we needed to scale quite quickly, and that was the biggest challenge of all. And this was about 2002, 2003, end of 2002, beginning of 2003, and and everyone was just getting over the hangover of the dot-com bubble. So there were a lot of young engineers out from university, but not many big companies were giving them jobs. So we kind of quickly lapped them up as quickly as we could, and luckily we got a load of people with a lot of talent. None of them were really interested in making games. They were all really good engineers who wanted to get into the IT industry doing services. And but what we realized is by grabbing them and by introducing them in the games industry, we actually helped seed the first, the first evangelists of the gaming industry in India. And from there, most of these guys who we ended up, teaching on the job, learning on the job, and learning how to create games in J2ME and in other platforms. They're the ones who ended up seeding the other companies like EA and Gameloft and Zynga and all these other studios when they came into the country.
Jugal?
Yes. Our story is a little different. We started in 2007, just like Rishi mentioned, with a bunch of guys who are more programmers than gamers. And we started doing outsourcing and work for hire, starting with Flash games, and moved on to iPhone, Facebook, and all those platforms when the market evolved. And now in 2009 we shifted into mostly our own IPs, and as of this week we just started an office in San Francisco to publish games on our own. So we've been an outsourcing shop to an IP this thing, and now we are getting into self-publishing on our titles. So that's what the CHHAYA story has been till now. Thanks.
Ninad?
So, yeah, it's been an interesting journey, starting off in the early days of the Indian gaming industry, and the way it kind of started off also had an interesting twist. The year was 1998, and India was at war with Pakistan. And Vishal and I had known each other for some time, and one day he calls me saying, hey, you know what, I have a great idea, let's make a game where we shoot down Pakistani soldiers. And I'm like, are you nuts? I mean, you can't do that, it's a serious issue. But he was insistent. He said, no, if you can create a concept, I can program it and we'll do it. So in a span of almost 12 to 18 hours, we kind of turned around the game. He was my lead and only programmer at that point of time, and I was his lead and only game designer at that point of time. And we created a game where you are an Indian soldier on the border and you shoot down Pakistani soldiers, Pakistani cricketers, Pakistani politicians. And the best part was you could never win. You could never lose, sorry.
I'm delighted this.
But, I mean, and that kind of was very interesting, and that kind of triggered a thing in us that it got very popular with people because it was a topical thing. And down the line, we realized that localized IP, which even Vishal mentioned in his talk earlier, also was something which Indian gamers were kind of getting used to the concept of gaming. And our families didn't know what we did for a living when we were going around building games. So we created a concept where we'll create localized IP-based games on Indian themes, cricket, Bollywood, religion, mythology. And interestingly, when we closed our first round of funding, my father actually didn't know why would anybody pay us $1 million to build games. From there till come 2012, where I'm on my third startup, building mobile social games. I don't think my dad still believes I build games for a living. But it's been an interesting journey. Pretty much the same challenges which Rishi and Jugal mentioned about finding people with that fire in their belly, the passion to create games. It's kind of, yeah, we like doing what we've been doing all along, find people who we think have that spark and throw them in the deep end of the pool. And if they sink, then we have we move on to the next guy. If they swim, we have a winner on our hands. So it's been a trial and error journey, but we are slowly getting method to the madness over there.
Anila?
Yeah, so we're from 99 Games, and 99 Games is essentially a spin-off of Robosoft Technologies based out of Udpi. The very fact that it's based out of Udpi is a good conversation starter. People are like, Udpi? Where the hell is Udpi? And we are proud to say that we put in Udpi on the map. Robosoft is a software development services company, and we were one of the premier developers for Apple. And when the App Store was launched in 2008, we thought that was a good opportunity for us to get onto the iOS platform, which is when 99 Games, started. So we started off with a game, a chess game, which did fairly well. Followed it up with a word game called Wordsworth, which was a phenomenal success for us, and we were very proud of the fact that we were able to conceptualize and create a game of that caliber, which catered to the audience in the US and UK. It was a very good game, and it even made it to the top 50 overall when the App Store was launched in 2009, early 2009. And we have grown a lot ever since. We have around 12 titles in our kitty so far, on the iPhone, iPad, Mac, and very recently into the Android as well. We are a small team of 25 people, and the 25 people includes a couple of producers, a lot of developers. We are essentially we're coming from a development background, a few designers, a lot of graphic artists and testers. So, and we also market the games ourselves. We have a little bit of experience in creating our own games and getting it published elsewhere. In fact, we had one of our titles published by Chilingo. It was a game called the Jim and Frank Mysteries, and it was a experience for us creating a game that big, and getting in touch with publishers and having a game published elsewhere. Likewise, we have also licensed a few games from other external developers and published it on the iOS platform on our own.
That's interesting. So you've done both ways to get your games out there.
Yes.
You've had. So how has been that experience for you? Being an Indian developer, publisher, who has had some titles being published by others in Western publishers publishing it in the Western market versus yourself.
There are different, I guess everybody would have the same discussion. Is it good to publish on your own, or is it good to get in touch with the publisher to publish your game? We have seen it both ways, and our experience with Chilingo for the Jim and Frank Mysteries was great. We were not a very known company until then, and when we made Jim and Frank Mysteries and we got in touch with a lot of publishers, we got in touch with Chilingo, we got in touch with EA and Namco Bandai. There were a lot of other publishers as well who showed a lot of interest in the game, and finally we had the opportunity to choose, which is, it is not just the fact that they picked us. We got an opportunity to choose someone whom we wanted to go ahead with, and it was a good experience because they were able to give us the push that was required to get onto the market. Chilingo was big with Angry Birds and Cut the Rope, which is why we went ahead with them. So that experience was wonderful. I don't think it would have been possible for us to publish that game on our own and make it big. So yeah, that's our take on it.
Cool. So if I had to go back to the theme that we all started with people who really did not have any development background. Early years were spent doing a lot of trial and error, taking maybe 2 or 3 or 4 times the amount of time that we would ideally have taken to make a game, to now where obviously I think there's a lot more maturity, there's a lot more, I think the level of productivity is a lot higher. What are some of your learnings in terms of getting your workforce, to be more knowledgeable, to build their skills? What are some of the things that have worked for you in building your workforce? Because that's kind of been one of the biggest challenges for all of us.
I think what we realized right up front was the reason why we were so inefficient was obviously lack of experience, and it wasn't really lack of experience in game in the technical aspects. It's more was lack of experience in what is a game. There was no such thing as game design back then. We really didn't know. I mean, it was almost like the garage days of when game creation really started off. And even though this was after the year 2000, it still felt like it was back in the 1980s where the American companies first started off the game creation. There was no such thing as game design, and the understanding of game design was really critical. The way we managed to do it was, like we said, trial and error. But slowly we realized that that wasn't the only way we could do it. We had to actually learn what game design was and get professional game designers, consultants on board and try to tutor us. Um, Today, I think the learnings of what we did back then have really paid off, because the whole team, whether they're programmers who start off at the lowest level, or whether they're testers or artists, they all, whenever they come in, they get introductions into games, into understanding what a game is, into understanding how do you create fun, what is feedback, um, and those kind of things are very important. A lot of people, when they come out of college, don't really, especially in university in India, they don't really have a sense of detailing, and the quality is there as far as finding solutions, but the detailing in the final product is something that has to be really drilled down from the people who have had the experience on the floor. And I think that's what's the difference between what we used to do back then and what we do now.
Okay. Jugul?
Yeah, so there is a huge difference between the talent that we get today and what we used to get when we started off. The kind of people that come today have grown up playing games, and it is
That makes a huge difference.
That makes
I
a
would
huge
say that it's a critical factor. When 15 years back, when we started, we actually had set up a game room, and we had PlayStation and Game Cubes. I'm talking about really early days. And people were seeing those consoles for the very first time in their lives. They had never seen a console before. And we'd have a library of over 200 games, and first 2 weeks, 3 weeks of time was just spent asking people to learn what games are all about, just check it out, because they had no idea of what it was all about. So it's
Yeah, so it is, so coming back to the point, so it's much more easier to make the people understand what these games are these days. But again, to design a game is a totally different story than when playing a game. So what we do is we end up doing a lot of training for the people to start thinking from an end user or an end gamer perspective. And many of these guys come from a hardcore gaming background, and when you are asking them to make a casual game, it's a totally different mindset also. So that mindset change for both the artists, the designer, the producers, and the developer. So we do the same kind of training all across the board, so the office, so that everybody is in sync. It's not only the game designers that are put through the whole process, because the passion of the programmer really sees in the final output, right? So that's something that we do on a continuous basis.
Inad?
So yeah, as both Rishi and Jugal said, we kind of learned trial and error when we started building games right from the early days. We didn't have any reference points except for playing games and understanding what worked. But over the period of time, we kind of put a process in place where whenever we hired somebody, as a part of their induction, they also need to, for at least 2 to 3 days in the initial week, they need to keep playing as many games as they can to understand the nuances of what goes into a game. Be it a designer, be it an engineer, be it a QA guy. The mandate is that the first 3 days you join, you need to play games, and not just PC or console games, but the more casual the game, the better. So we kind of give them the iPad and say, hey, come back to us after 3 days and tell us which games you played and what did you learn from that. Apart from that, to crunch the learning curve, we also work with, being a publisher, we work with a lot of indie developers globally to publish their games. So it's more of a collaborative effort where the producers and designers working from our end also learn a lot of project-related things when they're working on multiple projects, and vice versa. If we have an IP in mind, we bounce it off with our development partners globally to see, hey, how can we make it better and improve upon it and make a game which is a world-quality product. So it is more of a collaborative process internally as well as externally with our partners.
Anila?
In our case, Rajesh, we actually create a lot of games on the iOS platform. So We are big fans of Apple, and we've been doing a lot of work for Apple in the past. So that the whole thing of getting your design right is very, very important. And we look through a lot of tutorials that Apple provides us to understand and get your design right. Basically, you know, when I say design right, just try to make it as simple as possible. Eliminate all your elements to keep your interface clean. So that's the first thing we focus on. You know, try to have some sort of consistency in your UI elements. Apart from that, since we are in Udupi, it sort of it works two ways for us. You know, it's a little difficult for us to get talent to be in that place, and we start off getting freshers, and sometimes they're not very you know, they're tool people, they're tool guys, they're not very creative, and we need to get them to watch some soaps. And since we cater to the Western audience, we get them to watch soaps like, you know, Friends and Harry Potter and, you know, things like that, so that they're just acquainted with, you know, that culture. Apart from that, there are a few of us who read a lot of books and things like that, so we sort of
So
impart our
that's the whole
culture.
sensibility
Yeah,
side of
it's
things.
just about letting them know what the audience is like in abroad, since we are catering to that audience. And a few of us tend to attend a lot of conferences, try to get as much information as possible and try to pass on that info back to the team. So that's how we, you know.
I guess
do our
there's the one other aspect, which is many of us have done game development services over
Yes.
a number of years, and that's, you know, really helped in terms of you know, getting people up the learning curve. And sensibility, you know, look and feel, nuances, getting especially when you're designing products for a Western market, I guess it made a lot of difference. So where do you see your studios going? Where we are? We've all heard about the billion-dollar opportunity. We've heard about you know, I guess it's you know, we've heard 2 talks in the morning about India hitting $1 billion in terms of market opportunity in the next few years. So where do you see your studios going? How do you see yourselves leveraging this opportunity?
I think more than the billion-dollar opportunity, what we should be really looking for, and I think everyone anywhere in the world who's trying to make a game is looking for the billion-dollar IP. And today in India, there are a lot of companies, small companies, who are actually pushing for that because they're trying to create their own IPs. And I think that is possible today because a lot of people who started off in the industry like a few years ago and you know, did their time, so to speak, in the big companies making commercial games, started branching out and creating their own one-man, two-man shows, the indie game community, and they're looking for that original IP, that original innovation, and I think that is the key. It, I guess a lot of us will continue doing whatever we are doing because we are really successful at it. But the key is to try to see if we can break out, and the breakout only happens when there's innovation that is directed, and that innovation will only be directed if people who are bored of doing what they're doing start trying to doing something else. And if they're sitting in a company outside of the system, then it's probably easier for them to try to do that. The key is if you're trying to do it within a bigger company, then the company, I mean, we should, you know, within ourselves try to foster innovation amongst our teams. And if we can manage to do that, then we will see that breakout billion-dollar IP. And I think that's what everyone is hoping for, right?
Yeah. You know, we haven't really, you know, when we started off, one of our initial strategy was an India strategy with a portal called Games India and stuff. And since then, we have moved away from that. Since at that point of time, we had to survive, you know. So now that, you know, our Western strategies are almost in place, you know, maybe it's an year down the line, we might start really looking back at India, and especially on the mobile space. We don't want to go back to the feature phones because that's not our expert area, and we work on smartphones. So, from what Vishal was saying, you know, it's still if there is a 40 million smartphone users, maybe it's worth considering, but it's at least a year away for us.
So it's interesting, you just mentioned a Western strategy. So what is that Western strategy?
Uh, Western strategy is mainly we want to monetize the Western markets. So we believe that we will be able to if any of you listen to my other talk yesterday. So what we were trying to do is like if we really look at many of the companies out there, they were they had a one game wonders, or so we had a portfolio approach to things all throughout. And what we are trying to do with our Western strategy is also we believe we are much more cost effective. I wouldn't say cheap, cost effective in churning out much more titles. And we have a holistic approach of things, and you will see a series of products that are coming out for multi and cross platform from our studio. So our Western strategy is to go out in the market. We used to go for third-party publishers, so we are stopping that and going out on our own in the near future. So once that monetize a little bit and cover the cost, then maybe we can actually start looking at the Indian market also as a long-term strategy.
Inad, what is Playcasa up to?
So Playcasa is a publisher of casual social games on smartphones and social media platforms. So we work on two models. We create our own IP because, like Rishi said, I think the App Store and Facebook pretty much changed the whole gaming scenario, where a lot of developers wanted to get into the product IP creation space and are doing that in a big way. So we are creating our own IP, and we are also publishers for indie developers globally to publish their content on the app stores on the various marketplaces globally, because we believe there's a lot of potential talent out there, be it in India or outside. But some of these developers are, and they're really good at what they do, that is build games, but maybe because of lack of expertise or bandwidth or experience, they have not been able to monetize and promote these games effectively. So that's where we as Playcasa come in. We reach out to the developer and say, hey, you know what? We think you have a fantastic product. We can help you market it and promote it. And collectively, we are looking at building a platform for